Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another exciting episode of Climate Solutions Podcast. I'm Amma, and joining me, as always, is Brian. How are you doing today, Brian?
Hey, Amma. I'm doing great. I'm especially excited about today's episode because we're diving into something incredibly inspiring. We're going to talk about the incredible youth who are leading the charge on climate change and making a huge impact in the world.
Yes. Today, we're showcasing the incredible young activists who are standing up, speaking out, and taking action. These young leaders are showing us how it's done, and their stories are proof that age is no barrier when it comes to fighting for a better planet. From Greta Thunberg to local grassroots organizers, youth are showing the world how powerful they are in shaping the future.
That's right. And we're not just talking about celebrities like Greta, but also the everyday heroes who might not be in the spotlight, but are making real change in their communities and beyond. These are the stories of teenagers and young adults who, despite the challenges they face, have risen up to make a difference. It's amazing.
Absolutely. And to kick things off, let's talk about Greta Thunberg, who's become the face of the global youth climate movement. At just 15 years old, Greta started striking from school to protest inaction on climate change, and that one simple act sparked a global movement. The hashtag Fridays for Future movement has now inspired millions of students and young people to strike for climate action around the world.
Absolutely. And to kick things off, let's talk about Greta's story, which is so inspiring. Her ability to mobilize people, especially young people, is nothing short of amazing. She started with one small act, and now she's addressing world leaders at the UN and standing up to powerful political figures. What I love about Greta's message is that it's so clear. The climate crisis is an emergency, and young people have every right to demand action from their governments. She's shown us that you don't need to wait for permission to act. You can start right here, right now. Greta Thunberg, who's become the face of the global youth climate movement. At just 15 years old, Greta started striking from school to protest inaction on climate change, and that one simple act sparked a global movement. The hashtag Fridays for Future movement has now inspired millions of students and young people to strike for climate action around the world.
Absolutely, Brian. And now, I want to share a powerful clip from Greta Thunberg herself. She is speaking about the urgency of the climate crisis. Let's hear the clip.
And if a few children can get headlines all over the world just by not going to school, then imagine what we could all do together if we really wanted to. But to do that, we have to speak clearly, no matter how uncomfortable that may be. You only speak of green, eternal economic growth because you are too scared of being unpopular. You only talk about moving forward with the same bad ideas that got us into this mess, even when the only sensible thing to do is pull the emergency brake. You are not mature enough to tell it like it is. Even that burden you leave to us children. But I don't care about being popular. I care about climate justice and a living planet. Our civilization is being sacrificed for the opportunity of a very small number of people to continue making enormous amounts of money. Our biosphere is being sacrificed so that rich people in countries like mine can live in luxury. It is the sufferings of the many which pay for the luxuries of the few.
Incredible words from Greta. That urgency is at the core of her message. This is no time to wait. But she's not alone in her fight. There are so many youth activists around the world. One person who stands out is Xiuhtezcatl Martinez, an environmental activist from the US who has been fighting climate change since he was just 6 years old. Xiuhtezcatl has pushed for legal action on climate change and environmental justice, and his passion for protecting the earth is contagious.
Xiuhtezcatl's story is one of perseverance. He's not just fighting for policy change, he's also dedicated to educating young people about the urgency of the climate crisis. Through his work he's mobilized young people around the world to take a stand and demand climate action. Let's hear what Xiuhtezcatl has to say about the role of youth in this fight.
When I look into the eyes of my little siblings, my cousins, of the beautiful young children that I meet at places like this, that is what I am fighting for. And when I look at the people in the world that have tirelessly fought for their rights as human beings to live on a planet that is untarnished, unburned, and undestroyed by our greed, I see more bravery, more courage, more passion than I've ever seen ever in my life when I look at the people in this movement that are fighting and are continuing to fight. And it reminds me that we all have a part to play. We all have the responsibility to take the energy we feel here and carry that forward into our lives, into our communities, into our homes. And I look at the people I love and it reminds me that that is what I am fighting for.
Xiuhtezcatl's words hit home. Youth today are demanding accountability, and they're the ones who will bear the brunt of the choices made by today's leaders. That's why they're taking action now. Another remarkable young leader is Autumn Peltier, a water activist from Canada. Autumn has been advocating for clean water for Indigenous communities for years, and she's not just a local hero, she's a global one.
Autumn became the Chief Water Commissioner for the Anishinaabe Nation at a young age and has used her platform to fight for the rights of Indigenous peoples to access clean, safe water. She's spoken at the UN, met with political leaders, and even called out Canada's Prime Minister on water issues. Let's hear Autumn talk about the importance of water in the climate conversation.
My name is Autumn Peltier. I'm 18 years old. I'm the Chief Water Commissioner for Anishinaabe Nation, and I'm also an Indigenous rights and water activist. I wondered what message I could deliver to thousands of fresh thinkers, and what stuck with me are three things to leave with you: collaboration, youth, and what if. I hope you leave today with something of action in your hearts. In a room full of people, it only takes one person to influence change. What if that one person is you? My great auntie Josephine Buss spent her life protecting the water. She walked the 5 Great Lakes and always knew the water was getting sick. Her inspiration continues to feed my work. Mother Earth is hurting right now. If we look around, we can see it. Many people throw around the word sustainability, yet don't put the rubber boots on their feet. I'm not an 18-year-old interested in TikTok trends. I'm interested in a better tomorrow for those behind us, sustainability of ourselves. But I strongly believe sustainability starts with listening. Knowledge keepers are elders, and again, collaboration. My people continue to sustain our land through traditional teachings and respecting the ground we are lucky enough to walk on. It is this knowledge that continues to be passed to the next generation. Where I continue to see opportunity is collaboration. Indigenous people for generations have offered knowledge and truth and a true understanding of sustainable traditional approaches. Sorry, Alexa, Indigenous people practice plant-based medicine long before Alexa recommended it. The key to understanding sustainability is listening. Mother Earth is trying to send us a message. She has hope that we can provide honest and sustainable approaches. We need to listen to her, listen to each other, and collaborate.
Powerful words from Autumn. She's made it clear that water is at the heart of climate resilience, and the fight for clean water is a fight for the survival of all communities. Speaking of youth making waves in the fight for climate justice, let's talk about Ridhima Pandey from India. She made headlines at just 9 years old when she filed a petition with the Indian government demanding action on climate change. She's been pushing for accountability ever since, organizing protests and speaking out for the planet.
Ridhima's courage is awe-inspiring. At such a young age, she took on the Indian government and continues to speak out for the planet. Her activism is a powerful reminder that climate action is not just a concern for the future. It's a crisis we must address now. Let's hear from Ridhima herself about why she's so passionate about fighting for the environment.
I want all the global leaders to do something to stop climate change, because if it's not going to be stopped, it's going to harm our future. Millions of kids around the world are dying because of climate change or are living my nightmares, and I don't want that. I don't want my generation to suffer. According to the UNICEF's report, 1 billion children are highly exposed to very high level of air pollution. And even within kids and people, you know what's the worst case?
is that climate change doesn't impact each and every person in the similar way or in the same way it does. The poor and the weaker communities are the ones bearing the brunt of our wrong deeds. Climate change is projected to increase the number of people experiencing extreme poverty to 132 million by 2030. Over the last decade, the mortality from floods, droughts, and storms have been higher in the most affected countries. The gap between the economic output of the world's richest and the poorest countries is larger today than it would have been without global warming. We have to shift from gain maximization for a few to risk minimization for all. Now, when I say risk minimization for all, what I really mean is to get your help to address this crisis.
Ridhima's determination shows that youth are not just waiting for change, they're actively demanding it. And finally, let's talk about Vanessa Nakate from Uganda. She started striking from school in 2019 and quickly became a vocal advocate for climate action in Africa. She's been outspoken about the importance of including African voices in the global climate conversation. After a photo of her was cropped at the Davos Forum, she became even more determined to ensure that the global South isn't left out of these important discussions.
Vanessa is shedding light on the climate crisis that's disproportionately affecting the global South. She's challenging the global community to step up and be accountable, making sure Africa has a seat at the table. Let's hear Vanessa explain why African voices need to be included in the global climate conversation.
The latest available science tells us that in order to avoid the worst impacts of the climate crisis, we must reduce global CO2 emissions by somewhere between 7% to 11% this year and next year, and every year after until we get to zero. So what are we doing to pull ourselves back from the abyss? The idea that countries, companies, and investors committing to drastic and immediate action to reduce emissions would be most welcome. And every year, leaders come to these climate negotiations with an array of new pledges, commitments, and promises. And as each COP comes and goes, emissions continue to rise. This year will be no different. I hope that you can appreciate that the 9 million people dying every year from breathing toxic air from fossil fuel-driven air pollution do not have decades to wait for oil, gas, and coal to be phased out. I hope you can appreciate that where I live, a 2-degree world means that 1 billion people will be affected by extreme heat stress. In a 2-degree Celsius world, some places in the global South will regularly reach a wet bulb temperature of 35 degrees Celsius. At that temperature, the human body cannot cool itself by sweating. At that temperature, even healthy people sitting in the shade will die within 6 hours. We see business leaders and investors flying into COP on private jets. We see them making fancy speeches. We hear about new pledges and promises. But we are drowning in promises. Commitments will not reduce CO2. Promises will not stop the suffering of the people. Pledges will not stop the planet from warming. Only immediate and drastic action will pull us back from the abyss.
Vanessa's message is crucial. The global South has been on the front lines of climate impacts for years, and Vanessa is making sure that these communities are not overlooked in the conversation.
Exactly. And all of these youth leaders, Greta, Xiuhtezcatl, Autumn, Ridhima, and Vanessa, show us that age is no barrier to making a difference. Whether they're organizing strikes, fighting for environmental justice, or speaking truth to power, they're showing us that climate action isn't something that can wait.
They're the changemakers of today, not tomorrow. And I think it's important for everyone to remember that while these leaders are in the spotlight, each of us has the power to act, no matter our age. Youth activism is a call to action for all generations to get involved and take responsibility for our planet's future.
Well said, Brian. And speaking of changemakers, don't forget that these stories are just the beginning. Together, we can drive real change. Thanks for listening our podcast today, everyone. And remember, youth leading the charge is just the beginning. We all have the power to shape a better, more sustainable future.
Absolutely. Together, we can make a difference. Stay inspired, stay motivated, and take action. Whether you're 8 or 80, thanks for joining us, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to CCN News for more inspiring stories and solutions.
Until next time, stay green and keep fighting for the planet. Take care, everyone.
Bye.